Also, the overall concept, how we're always supposed to never lose focus on the individual. The Rebbe always taught us the importance and the beauty of the individual. So it's important to know your job. They tell the story that after 6 months of working at this company, it was time for David's evaluation. David walks into the boardroom, and there's three designer suit-clad personnel managers, and they're sitting behind a mahogany desk. And the one on the left scans David's file, looks up at him accusingly and says, I see here that you have not reported at work for 9 a.m., not even one time, since you began to work here. And the woman in the middle shakes her head and remarks, this is a Fortune 500 company. Instead of a jacket and tie, you come in here wearing jeans. And the last guy on the right stares at the papers in his hand and says grimly, our surveillance cameras show that you spend less than 10% of your working hours at your desk. The rest of the time, you're walking around the building. So the first evaluator shoots the question. He says, David, do you have anything to say for yourself? David looks up. He says, yes, I was hired as the night watchman. So we're now in the great time of the portion of Pekudei, which is the final parsha in the book of Exodus. And we're taught that the beauty of this parsha is that it really combines the entire book of Exodus and teaches us a lesson as everything goes according to the finale, as the last part. So in this concluding portion, the parsha is called Pekudei, which means accounting. And it's in opening verses, we're taught that Moses presented a detailed account of the many donations contributed for the conclusion of the tabernacle. Not a single coin remains unaccounted for. Moses reports to the people how many pounds of gold, silver, and copper he received, and how exactly they were used for the structure. And he gives an account for every last piece of jewelry and metal that came into his hands. But why is this relevant? Did people think Moses packed away some cash to go buy real estate in Saudi Arabia or to purchase a private jet? And even if Moses felt compelled to give an accounting, as the Medrash tells us, there was actually some nudniks who demanded for it. Why does the Torah have to record it? After all, this is a story that will repeat itself. As what's the point of knowing the details of each contribution? And even if it's important to know that Moses gave an accounting to teach us the importance of transparency, the Torah could have simply said that Moses gave an accounting of all gold, silver, and copper contributed to the sanctuary project. So the name of the portion is also unique. The name of each Torah portion captures the very essence and theme of the portion. Pekudei, which means accounts, represents an individual count of each donation and item separately. And it begins, indeed, with Moses giving us accounting whatever the people gave him. And yet a major part of the Parsha is devoted to the Mishkan's assembly, from fragmented pieces into a single unit. The Torah relates how the components built were fitted together to form the sanctuary, and how Moses erected his home, and how the Shekhinah, the divine presence, came to dwell in the completed structure. Now, this is the opposite theme of the portioning, which is Pekudei, which always relates to the distinct and unique. You don't count a single home. You count individual bricks, beams, doorknobs, and it seems that a far more appropriate name for this week's portion would be Mishkan, the sanctuary, or the dwelling place, which is the third word in the portion, right after the word Pekudei. So the answer to this is profound, and it was presented by the Rebbe at the last Farbrengen the Rebbe gave, which was February 29th, 1992. I was a student in New Haven at the time and had the honor of being there that Shabbos. And the theme of the entire second book of the Torah is dedicated to nation building. In Genesis, we're referred to as Bnei Yisrael, which means the children of Israel. We're a family and quite fragmented. It's only in Exodus when we're first called Am, like Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai, which means the nation. And this is the pervading thread of the entire book of Exodus. While the narratives in Genesis focus on individuals, Adam, Eve, the snake, Cain, Noah, Abraham, Sarah, we had Lot, we had Hagar, we had Ishmael, Isaac, Rebekah, their two children, Esau and Jacob, Rachel, Leah, Judah, Joseph, and the list continues. And Exodus is a book about people, a nation. Individuals are mentioned, of course. There's Pharaoh, there's the daughter of Pharaoh, there's Moses, there's Aaron, but all these names are discussed as representatives of a nation assisting in some form the forming of a nation. So Shemos, Exodus is about the collective, not the individual. So Exodus begins with a story of how a massive group of disjointed and oppressed slaves are transformed into a cohesive nation. From disintegration, we become a collective and we achieve nationhood. And it continues with a story of Mount Sinai, where the people are given a unifying mandate and constitution, which we study till today, which is called the Torah. 40 days later, in the moment of collective insanity, the people deny God. They substitute the moral sovereign of the universe with a golden calf. God now views his attempt to mold people into Mamleches Kohanim, a kingdom of princes and a sacred nation, as a colossal failure. Moses stands up to God and he asks God for a deeper, deeper chord in his relationship with Israel. And we're taught that God re-embraces the people and instructs them to build a home in their midst for his elusive presence. In this sanctuary, the all-pervading truth of God would be more manifest and accessible. The Jewish people en masse contribute large amounts of gold, silver, copper. Today would be stocks, bonds, real estate, and many other materials required for the construction of this exquisite tabernacle. Moses appoints brilliant architects, sculptors, and designers to build this home, to build the vessels, carve out the furniture, and craft items that would make up the new divine home. And this is the home of the people, serving every single member of the Jewish people. It was built by the people with the donations of every single Jew who wished to contribute or to volunteer in any given way. And it was built for the people. It was the first time something was created. You know, as it says in Lincoln's memorial, his memorable phrase, he says, of the people, by the people, for the people. So at last, the long journey is complete. And at the opening of this week's Torah portion, the last portion of the book, Pekudei, the national project is done. Soon the sanctuary would be erected and the divine presence would be, residing there. And this is a charged moment, a dramatic peak in a long, turbulent journey of a people. And after all the ups and downs, God is about to move in with his people. And me? So here comes a profound challenge. Does nation building by definition come at the expense of an individual? Does the individual lose his character? Sure, you can't have a nation without individuals joining together. Perhaps the value of the individual is only insofar as he or she becomes a part of a whole. The value of my I is only due to the fact that it contributes to the we. Many of us feel kind of that spirit to this day. A sense of peoplehood has long been the defining characteristics of the Jews. The central experience of Jewish history, the only event that demands an annual retelling, is the Exodus from Egypt. This was an experience of national liberation rather than individual freedom. Now, indeed, wherever Jews have lived, they've built synagogues, Chabad houses, established communal, social, religious organizations. They created systems of communal responsibility and governance. We are a people of community, of collectivity. So over the generations and to this very day, Many Jews have felt that allegiance to the people of Israel must naturally compromise allegiance to their individual journey. Either I become a part of a big machine, or I must go to search for myself elsewhere. And this is the revolutionary message that the Rebbe tells us is in this week's portion of Pekudei. You see, before we conclude the book of Exodus, dedication to nation building, the Torah dedicates the final portion to the idea of the individual. The Torah interrupts the narrative, shifting the story from creating a space for God in this world to the work of counting every individual contribution which came in. Moses presents a detailed account of every last shekel which was donated to the grand cause. There's no contribution that is not worthy of being accounted for, because there's no person who's not recognized as an individual with his or her own hopes, with his or her own dreams, aspirations, disappointments, challenges. This is not only because every dollar counts. $1 billion are made up of single dollars. But the reason is because the life and contribution of the individual matters in and of itself. In fact, in the midst of the grand national project, Moses conducts 2 counts. He counts the people in Kisiso, which is via the half shekel contribution that each one gave. And then he counts the contributions themselves in this week's Torah portion. Strangely, the census of the people is defined in these words: Kisiso esresh, lift up the heads of the children of Israel. God is saying we don't count people to turn them into numbers, but rather to highlight the uniqueness of each one counted. Indeed, in Jewish law, a dovar shebeminyan, something that is counted, sold individually rather than by weight, is never nullified, even in a mixture of 1,000 or 1,000,000 others. In Judaism, taking a census must always be done in such a way as to signal out that we are valued as individuals. We each have unique gifts. There's a contribution only I can bring. To lift someone's head means to recognize their uniqueness. There's a remarkable story that illustrates this point. A century ago, there was a world-revered great symphony conductor, an Italian maestro. His name was Arturo Toscanini, and he lived from 1867 to 1957. And he led concerts all over the world, and he was known as an absolute perfectionist. And very few were up to his level. Toscanini had a biographer who would interview him periodically, and he was working on this major book about Toscanini. And one evening he called Toscanini. He says, I'm going to be in town next week. Is there any way I could stop by in the evening? And Toscanini said, no, I'm doing something very special. You can't join me. He says, Maestro, what are you doing so special? So Toscanini said, there's a concert that's being played overseas. I used to be the conductor of that symphony orchestra. And I couldn't be there this year. So I'm going to listen on my shortwave radio and hear how the other conductor leads the orchestra. I don't want any interruptions whatsoever. So the biographer says, Maestro, it would be my greatest honor and pleasure to watch you listen to the concert. I promise I won't say anything. I'll stay on the other side of the home, very far from you. I just want to look at you. So the maestro said, if you promise to be perfectly quiet, you can come. So the next night, the biographer came and sat quietly. Toscanini listened to the concert. And when it was done, the biographer looks at Toscanini and says, wasn't that magnificent? And Toscanini says, no, not really. He says, why not? He says there was supposed to be 120 musicians, including 15 violinists, but only 14 of them showed up. Now the biographer thought this was a joke. How could he know 6,000 miles away over a shortwave radio that one of the violinists was missing? But he decided to call the music hall. So he got an operator, got over the good old days to get through to overseas, and asked to speak to the music director. And the concert hall director told him that there was supposed to be 120 musicians, including 15 violinists. but only 14 had shown up. So this guy was blown away. He returns to Tuscanini and says, "Sir, I owe you an apology. I thought you were just making it up the other night. But please tell me, how could you know that one violinist was missing?" So Toscanini looked at him and said, "There's a big difference between you and me. To the audience, everything sounds wonderful. But I'm the conductor. And the conductor has to know every note of music that has to be played. When I realized that certain notes were not being played," he says, "I knew without a doubt that one of the violinists was missing." Every one of us has been given the gift of playing a unique part in the symphony of life. Now, it may seem insignificant to some, but the conductor is intensely attentive to every note we hit correctly, as well as every mistake that mars the beauty of the entire performance. Each of us is indispensable to the conductor and creator of the universe. In the magazine, The Diplomat, a Chinese scholar explained the difference between China dream and the American dream. He said the China dream, he wrote, is the dream of a nation. The American dream is the dream of an individual. What is the dream of Judaism? It's the dream of a nation, but it's equally the dream of an individual. The line of the comedian, he says, a graduation ceremony is an event where the commencement speaker tells thousands of students who are dressed in identical caps and gowns that individuality is the key to success. A wise man once said, diversity is the one true thing we all have in common. Now, this is a profoundly Jewish idea. Just as no two faces are alike, no two minds are alike, tells us the Talmud. There are many things which unite us. Our single creator, our shared human aspirations, needs, our feelings. We all moved, when we see a sunset, smile at a child, we cry at a funeral. But there's also much which divides us. And that which divides us is as divine as what unites us. People are not the same. And they're not supposed to be the same. This is a revolutionary idea of Judaism. Each person must say, Bishvili nivra elam. For me, the world was created. Not only am I not a small peg in a big structure, but rather the entire structure depends on me. There's something at stake in my life which for the entire universe waits. There's, however, an important difference between individuality and individualism. Individuality means that I'm unique and a valued member of a team. Individualism means that I'm not a team player at all. I'm interested in myself alone, not the group. Judaism values individuality, not individual. The famed chief rabbi of Great Britain of blessed memory, Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, he relates that he once had the opportunity to ask the Catholic writer Paul Johnson what had struck him most about Judaism during the long period he spent researching it from the mastery work. If you ever got to see that book called The History of the Jews. And he replied roughly in these words, and I quote, "There have been in the course of history societies that emphasize the individual, like the secular West today. And there have been others that placed weight on the collective, communist Russia or China, for example. And Judaism," he continued, "was the most successful example he knew of a tradition that managed the delicate balance between both, giving equal weight to individual and collective responsibility. Judaism was a religion of strong individuals and strong communities. This," he said, "was very rare and difficult and constituted one of the greatest achievements." Now, Paul Johnson was correct. What he did not realize is that the notion goes back to the genesis of Jewish history. God made a promise to Abraham after the binding of Yitzhak Isaac, which we read also on Rosh Hashanah, that I will increase your children like the stars in the heaven and the sand of the sea. The question we have is, why this dual illustration of stars and the sand? The number of stars exceed even the sand of the beaches. To speak of the sand after the stars, it's kind of extra. It's because a single grain of sand is valueless. Combined together, they make up a wonderful beach in Hawaii, Greece, Riviera, Eilat, Bermuda, Cancun, Malibu, or even Miami. One little grain of sand does not amount to anything. But together, it's a thing of value. The sand can form a beach, mud, glass, computer chips, etc. Stars, in contrast, are individuals. Each one is a powerful source of light and energy on its own. Indeed, two stars coming together can be a destructive force. When stars collide, they destroy each other. So God tells Abraham that we will be blessed with both of these qualities, sand and stars. On one hand, we're all united. We're one. As it says in the Mishnah, if I'm for myself, what am I? On my own, I'm a grain of sand. Together, when I connect my life with others, with family, community, the Jewish nation, and all peoples, I become so much larger and deeper. But there's another side to the promise. Your children will be like the stars. Each person seen as a unique individual, with his or her unique light and warmth and energy. Because the value of individuality is also divine. And there's a fascinating law in Judaism, and it shows you how far we take this idea. Say, heaven forbid, a powerful army approaches a Jewish community and says, give us one soul. Give us one Jew to murder. If not, we will, heaven forbid, murder the entire community. What would you say is the right thing to do? Maybe we find an old Jew who's frail and senile and give him over and save the community. Or maybe we find someone who's ill who will die anyhow sooner or later. So according to Jewish law, you may not give over any life, even to save the community. What's the logic? Because if you give up one life, you save 1 million lives. If the individual is what he or she brings to the collective community, for sure, he should be discarded for the public. Says halacha, says code Jewish law. No, you may not. Why not? Says the Rebbe, because the value of a life is absolute, infinite, limitless. It's not a numbers game. In that sense, 1 and 1 million are the same. For God, the individual life is as essential and important and as special, as valuable as the lives of 1 million. I simply can't say giving up for 1 million. So this gives us perspective on how we're supposed to respond to Congresswoman Omar and all the other ugly displays of anti-Semitism that sadly we've seen in recent days, weeks, and months. Because even if one single Jewish life will be put in danger, we ought to shake the heavens and the earth. Never mind when hundreds of thousands of Jews are vulnerable to all types of Jew haters and Israel haters who simply loathe our people and our homeland. You know, in the film Judgment at Nuremberg, the American judge Dan Haywood sentenced Ernest Janning, an important legal figure in Germany even before the rise of Hitler. And he puts him away to life in prison for condemning an innocent Jewish doctor to death in 1935. And Janning pleads to Haywood that he was unaware of the magnitude of the Nazi horror, and he would never have assisted Hitler had he known what the monster was planning. And Janning begged for his freedom. He said, those people, those millions of people, I never knew it would come to that. You must believe it. To which Judge Haywood replied, and I quote, it came to that the first time you sentence a man to death, you need to be innocent. The moment a single life loses its absolute value, 1,000 lives, even 1 million lives, are ultimately not of value. They're merely more choking numbers. And this message was never forgotten from the hearts of the Jewish people, even during the most terrible times when life became worthless to so many cultures and nations. And this duality is expressed in our very name. What's the name of the Jewish people? We're called Bnei Yisrael, Yisrael. Like in Hebrew, it's called Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. And what does Yisrael stand for? It's an acronym of their 6,000 letters in the Torah. Yisrael, Yud, Yesh. The Sin is Shishim. The Resh is Ribui. And the Aleph is Aleph. And the Lamed is the Torah. There's 600,000 letters in the Torah. For each Jew represents a letter Torah scroll. What does this mean? Because a Torah scroll contains actually 304,805 letters, each handwritten in black ink on a parchment. If a single letter is missing or deformed, the entire scroll is unfit for use. Additionally, each of the letters must be ringed by white space. Should a letter touch its fellow even slightly, thereby trespassing the white space between the letters, again, the entire scroll is disqualified from use. Every Jew is a letter in God's scroll. The people of Israel comprise a single independent entity. The lack of deformity of a single Jewish soul, God forbid, would spell a lack in us all. Yet equally important is that white space, which distinguishes each of us as a unique individual. So Moses knew there's a danger in building a nation. When you focus on the big picture, you can lose sight of the individual. You see the forest and you lose sight of the story of each individual tree with its unique roots, history, trunk, branches, struggles to survive, etc. In the vital work of building the grand home, the individual can feel insignificant. What am I? What difference can I make? I am only one of the millions, a mere wave in the ocean, a grain of sand on the seashore, or dust in the surface of infinity. So Moses needs to teach the Jewish people the Jewish approach. The God of all is also the God of one. And that is why this week's Parsha, it's dedicated to the final erection of the collective sanctuary of all people. It's titled Pekude, representing the individual count. Because even as the collective celebrates, the individual must lift up his head. The word Pekude also means intimacy. Intimacy, by definition, is one, not with a whole group. Moses was teaching his people that even as we love and celebrate our collective entity, as one nation under God, and God know how much we need that now between all the challenges since October 7th. In the face of such hatred, we must stand united. More than ever, with unwavering strength, resolve, and pride and courage, we also cherish and celebrate the intimacy, the pekude of every individual, your own intimate journeys and relationships with yourself, with God and your loved ones. So even at the end of the days, right before Mashiach is coming tonight, the whole of human history culminates in the divinely perfect and harmonious age, what we call Mashiach. This duality will continue to define our identity and nationhood, because the ultimate redemption will be a communal redemption. When, as the prophet Jeremiah describes, a great community shall return here, but also be the realization of Isaiah's vision of a time when you shall be collected. You shall be collected one by one, O children of Israel. And as Rashi put it, God will hold each and every one by the hand and bring them back. So the merit of us appreciating the beauty of being a part of this great nation, but also not losing sight of every individual. How every neshama is so precious, so loved, so unique, so great. And we merit to have the ultimate time, the coming of Mashiach, even before our trip to the Holy Land in 3 weeks. And let's hope and pray that we should merit true peace all over the world with the coming of Mashiach. Any questions? Beautiful. I want to wish a good Shabbos. I hope Gittel is doing well at a battle, and only good news by the whole mishpacha.